Hello, I'm Vaping Jesus. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about electricity and whatnot. The best way for me to explain electricity to you is that electricity will be like, or voltage I should say, voltage would be like the pressure, and amperage would be the water, and resistance would be the hose. So when you're using electricity, the voltage is going to push the amperage through the hose, and the amount of resistance the hose has, how closed up it is, how restricted it is, would be the amount of resistance. So if it has a lot of resistance, the hose is going to be really restricted, and less amperage is going to flow through, and you have to use more voltage, more pressure to push that amperage through because of the resistance. So just to give you a general idea how to conceptualize electricity to make it more easier for you to understand electricity. Now, if you have the volts that are in your battery, you know how many volts the battery holds, and you know what the resistance is on your wire, you can figure out the amperage, and you can figure out anything if you have two of the three. There's a formula that we know of in the electrical industry, and it's E over I times R. Now, how that works is that I times R would equal E, or E divided by I equals R, or E divided by R equals I. What the I is intensity or intense, it's a Latin word, but that's basically your amperage. R stands for resistance, and E stands for electricity, which is going to be your voltage. So the R is actually your ohms, your resistance, your ohms. So if you know your amperage and you know the volts, you can just divide the volts by the amperage, and you'll get the ohms. And then you divide the voltage by the ohms, you'll get the amperage, and so forth. And then amperage times ohms will equal your voltage. So just so you have that little formula so you can use it to your advantage if you ever don't have a multimeter or you don't know your resistance or what have you. Because you can just using your what the amperages and the ohms are, the amperages and the resistance is, what the amperages and the electricity is, the voltages, you can figure out what your ohms are. And so there has been a problem lately with vapes blowing up, and that's because people don't know enough about electricity. And so once again I'm going to explain the vapes a little more differently, a little more simpler, without a huge visual. Okay, I'm going to use a mod, because a mod's a little more complicated with two batteries, and you should know this because this tends to be a problem. I've run across the problem myself. I had a store owner tell me that it was a series mod when it was a parallel mod, and that was dangerous because you put the batteries in the wrong way, they can blow up, and they did blow up on me. Thankfully I'm alright, but you just gotta understand, you gotta look for it yourself, because the shop owners aren't always gonna know. Okay, so here's your mod. Say this is your mod right here, and this right here is gonna be your atomizer. Okay, now inside of your mod you have two batteries. Okay, in fact, you know what, let me get a little closer. Okay, you're going to have two batteries, and when it's a parallel mod, both of the batteries are going to be facing the same direction. You got positive up here and negative down here. Okay, now electricity in DC electricity flows out of the negative and comes back to the positive. In alternating current, it's the other way around, and that's for your house voltage. You don't have to worry about it. DC voltage is anything that has batteries. Okay, so the electricity is going to leave the negative. It's going to come out of both of these batteries at the same time, so they're going to have the same exact amount of voltage, and it's going to come out and up to your atomizer, and it usually travels up the chassis of the vape or the box mod, but sometimes they're insulated, and so it'll travel up some sort of a conduit up to the atomizer. Now when it comes out, the negative comes out and travels up to the atomizer. The two outside posts are your negative posts, and those are attached to the outside of the atomizer, the chassis of the atomizer. So when it comes up to that negative post. Now when it goes to that negative post, it goes through there, then it travels through the coil to the positive post, and if you can see, the positive post on either side is insulated, because it's got to be insulated from the chassis of the atomizer and from the chassis of the vape itself. So it'll go through the coil to the positive post, and then there will usually be a positive post in your vape itself, so this post touches this post, and then they usually have a piece of metal so that both of the positive sides of the battery can touch that metal, so it'll come through there, through here, into the positive sides of your battery. And that's how a parallel circuit works in a parallel mod. Now, in a series mod, it's the other way around, because in a series mod, it goes through one battery and then through the other, so it has a combination of voltage and a combination of amperage, a total together. Whereas like if it was 4 volts and 4 volts, then the only volts coming out is 4 volts. But if they're in series, now you got 8 volts, you see. So then you have to regulate it, you know. So in a series mod, this would be positive, this would be negative, okay? And so in a series mod, the voltage is going to come out of here. This will be insulated so that it's not touching the chassis of the mod, or it's not touching a piece of conduit. So that it's insulated by itself, because you can't have positive and negative at the same time going through the chassis. It's not going to work. It's going to blow up or melt or whatever. So nonetheless, it's going to come through the negative. It's going to go through some sort of conduit here, but it's all going to be insulated, and then it's going to go right back up into here, go out through here, and then out here to another piece of conduit that's going to go up to the atomizer. And that's how that'll work. And then when it returns, instead of returning through here, it's not going to return through there, it's just going to return through here. So it's going to return to the positive, negative, out. That's how that works. Okay? Now when you're building with your coils, electricity follows the path of least resistance. So if you have 2 coils, and one of them is longer than the other, the one that's longer provides more resistance because there's more metal for it to travel through. So remembering the hose theory, when it has more metal, that's kind of like a restricted hose. So it's not going to pass through that as easily because it's too restricted. It's going to pass through the hose that's bigger because it's going to flow a lot more. So the coil, the wire that is smaller, it's going to travel through first because it's going to heat up a lot quicker in that one, not the big wire. So you're going to have an uneven matched coils. One's going to heat up quicker than the other just because it has less wire in it. So if you're unevenly heating up, you got to unlengthen one of the coils, shorten it so that it's even. And the one you're going to have to shorten will be the one that's colder, it's not as hot. And the problem, the reason why you want to have both coils heating at the same time, and for people that don't know this, people that aren't vapors, is that if one of the coils heats up all the cotton real quick and the juice evaporates in the steam, and it's dried out, you're going to get that dry hit. Even though one's still got a lot of juice in it, you're going to be getting a dry hit because the other one's still not producing enough vapor for you, and it's going to taste nasty. And then on top of that, you're going to keep juicing up this one side, whereas this side is going to be drying out, and this side is going to keep getting more juice and more juice and more juice, and it's going to gunk up inside your vape, and that could cause a messy problem. So that's why you want both coils to be operating the same. But there's one more thing with the problems with vapes exploding, other than if someone has put the batteries in backwards or what have you, and that has to do with this thing right here. This is the little pin inside the vape that the pin in the atomizer touches. Okay, some vapes don't have this pin. What they have is the pin from the atomizer makes direct contact with the top of the battery, and when that happens, your pin, let's say a view from underneath staring straight at the bottom of the atomizer, okay, for the pin that's coming down into the vape. This would be the insulated part, and this would be the pin in the center, okay? It'd be the insulated part and the pin in the center. Because here's the insulation on the sides, and here's a pin in the middle, okay? The pin's in the middle, insulation around the sides, alright? Now, well, the pin protrudes a little further than the outside, because the outside is your negative pretty much, and then there's neoprene insulating between the negative and the positive pin in the middle. And so the positive pin, you can turn it so it protrudes out past the insulation, past the negative side outer shell, and when you do that, it'll make contact with your pin, because sometimes the pin in the vape is like recessed down a little or what have you, so you got to protrude it out or bring it in. Well, if you have a vape that has direct contact with the top of the battery instead of a pin inside of the vape itself or the mod itself, the pin from the atomizer, since it's protruding, can poke a hole in that battery if you tighten it down too tight with a protruding pin, and it'll poke a hole in there. And that can also happen in the bottom of your vapes when you have those little pieces where you turn the screw in and it touches your battery. if it's not a big, nice, flat surface that's smacking up against the bottom of your battery, and it's just a little pin that's smacking up against the bottom of your battery, that could poke a hole in your battery as well when you tighten it down. Because that pressure of tightening these things down to squeeze this battery in to make the contact, if they're not flat and they're little tiny pins, they can poke holes in that battery. And if it does, when you have a lithium-ion battery and you poke a hole in it, that's what will cause it to explode. You go on YouTube and you'll see cell phones where they stab it with a knife and the cell phone explodes, because those lithium-ion batteries cannot be punctured. Another problem is people throw batteries in their pocket, and when they have a piece of metal that makes contact with a positive and a negative side of the battery, it can explode. But it would be very hard to, but it is possible. Like a big large piece of foil or a big key or something that can touch both sides of the battery could actually make it explode. Or a big pocket full of coins could be the conduit path from coin to coin to coin to coin, going from one side of the battery to the other side of the battery. And when you touch a positive with a negative, you're getting an electrical path from the battery, heating it up in your pocket, and your pocket has material that is flammable, causing a fire. Once that battery catches on fire, you're puncturing the battery, and then once you puncture that battery, it explodes. So there's a lot of dangers with batteries and vapes if you don't educate yourself and know how to operate one. And it's mostly because of the lithium-ion battery. I would also say to be careful with your batteries on your cell phones, because you have that next to your face just like you do a vape, and if they explode because they are poorly manufactured and have holes in them for any reason whatsoever, then they can explode in your face. And that has happened too, but that just doesn't make the media. So just understand lithium-ion batteries, like even in your little hoverboard things, whatever, lithium-ion batteries can be dangerous if they're misused, overused, overheated, or punctured. Those can cause the batteries to explode. And that is one of the big dangers, other than putting your batteries in backwards or puncturing it somehow yourself. That's what creates the problems with vapes exploding and what have you. And so I hope you got a good enough education from this. I hope you learned a little something, and I will talk to you next time.